Got it. Hopefully this is YouTube and not my computer. Work slowly.
Hey, YouTube fellows.
We are live on the YouTube. Tweet.
Live on YouTube.
Stretch out. Put the mic in. Over. Record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We are live on YouTube, and we're recording the podcast, and we'll have that up for you folks that are on the YouTube feed or not in a little bit when we're done. So plenty to talk about this week. We've got a lot of off-the-field storylines with Iowa football. We've got on-court basketball, wrestling. So plenty to get to, Scott. We're in December, and as luck would have it, soon as, not soon as, but hours after we recorded last week, Iowa, the biggest news, I think, Cade McNamara out from Michigan, backup quarterback at Michigan. Iowa faced him last year, yada, yada, is coming to Iowa. And it's kind of a new era in a way. Quarterback wise, people weren't sure who the quarterback would be next year. That was a popular question this year. Who will be Iowa's starting quarterback in 2023? And now we know.
I think that level of aggressiveness is really good for Iowa. It identified very quickly who it wanted. And as soon as it opened, and, I'm sure there were some backdoor, communication at some point somewhere, but as soon as he announced, Iowa was very aggressive, and Iowa went out and became the first school to really take advantage of this. They struck the biggest blow. It became national news, and it got its quarterback for next year. And Cade McNamara is going to be slow in recovery, but hey, this guy's a graduate of the University of Michigan. He led him to a Big Ten championship, a playoff berth last year. Played really well. Does he have the top end ability, or maybe as a JJ McCarthy? Probably not. But you know what? I think he could be very, very successful for the Hawkeyes and do some great things. And hats off. They did it. They needed to do it. They did it. NIL period. They got it done. And it looks like he's going to. He's at least provided Iowa with some legitimacy for free agents out there. Let's call them free agents, portals, transfers. Where his tight end is coming this weekend, Eric All, and if you bring him, that's a major replacement for Sam Laporta. And they've got some receivers too that I think have a chance to step in and make an impact right away that could be on their way.
Yeah, it sounds like Trajan Holden, who from Alabama, who was kind of got some buzz with Iowa shortly after McNamara announced he was coming to Iowa. That is not going to happen. So we move on. And I guess just overall, before we dive in here a little bit more, Scott, I said this on the Mailbag podcast, and I don't want to come off as somebody who's preaching, but this is kind of a new process, not only for the football program, but for the fans. And we talked a little bit before we hit record on this. People could do whatever they want, but I would caution people to just kind of let this play out. And it's hard to do this day and age with how quickly information moves and interactions on social media and things like that. But, and again, we talked about this before recording, but, a lot of hand-wringing with 8 Hawkeyes going into the portal and only one known at this point coming to Iowa. But that's kind of the way this process moves. And you're going to drive yourself crazy if you live, on the edge of every decision that's being made here. You really just need to let it go through and just kind of see where things end up. And then even after that, what Scott and I have talked about is we heard a lot of this offense is going to be simplified, streamlined, all these things last year, and it wasn't. I'm still of the mind of I'm just going to kind of take this as it goes, and then we'll see what the product looks like next August, September. And then we can figure out how things are going here. But I think if you're with as much activity and movement as there is, this is very long-winded, by the way, in the sport right now, I think you're going to drive yourself crazy if you're living, going, overreacting to every decision that's made.
This is the way the portal works. And I don't want to come across certainly as pompous or anything like that, but working in a company where, we have beat writers at Miami and in Texas and all over the country. Iowa has been on the sideline this era. So it's a new experience, I think, for everybody. And, to hear everybody else's experiences and see it develop last year and in the spring, you're just like, is this ever going to happen here? And I think what you've got to remember is the players first have to leave, then they have to pick their school. And some of them, a very few know where they're going to go. Now, McNamara jump-started the process because he found out right away where he wanted to go. And I think there was an expectation that, he picked it, so that means 4 or 5 other guys are going to come along with him immediately. And that's not the way it works, because these players also have to figure out what's best for them. And that could be Isaac Tesla from Hillsdale College, and the Division II guy whose film is just unbelievable. He went to Iowa State last weekend. He's coming to Iowa this weekend. Does he want to come here and play with McNamara? Does he want to go somewhere else? I think, that you just got to let the system play out, because they want to make a good decision too. I mean, they're leaving their first school. So I think when you see all these players leaving, there's an automatic, what's going on? Nobody back in Iowa. Well, they're not even in the top 15 nationally in departures. I mean, when you're looking at Miami, that's at 13, 14, Texas A&M's had that many, Virginia Tech. It's just, you got to let it play out. And you also have to take it case by case. And, there are 8 scholarship players. And, I would say you look at Alex Padilla. He knew he wasn't going to be the starter. They're going to move on from him. What do you expect? I mean, that's not I know I had a couple of people tweet me when he decided to announce, and it's like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, what do you want? You want him to stay? And
I think that was the least surprising thing that's happened.
Yeah, exactly. Gavin Williams, he moved to 3rd on the depth chart. That's going to happen. Josh Volk didn't even make the 105 in camp, and barely dressed. So, Reggie Bracey, he's a guy we've talked about before, that you kind of get to that point in your career. You want to be a starter. You want to put yourself in that role. And when you have guys like Xavier Wampa behind you, it's going to be tough to be in that position where you think you're going to start. Terry Roberts, as a graduate transfer, was he going to be a starter? Did he feel like he needed a fresh start? And, did Iowa just think, hey, you're kind of injury prone here, we need to do something, or what? The receivers are problematic, but who could blame them at this point? The one that I think really sticks out in a negative way, a painful way, is probably Justin Jacobs. But this is what happens in the portal, that players who have a market want to test the market. It's kind of like free agency in sports. Maybe they'll come back, but I think in his case, when you're injured, when you kind of been a backup / starter, even though next year would be a great year for him at Iowa, sometimes you have a wandering eye and you don't feel like this is the place for you. Those things happen. I just think it's okay to be disappointed with a couple, but I don't think, lashing out or, oh, I can't believe this. Is anybody back? Is anybody going to be? That's not the way to react right now.
Yeah, no question. And it's I think sometimes we look for a blanket reason for why guys leave, whereas it's more of a case by case individual. Like, I see people saying it's just a money grab and guys are going in the portal so they can get NIL money. Well, some probably are doing that, but not everybody's doing that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just to find a better situation. And I think what you said, the most interesting part of this, and we do have guys that are transferring for the third and fourth times, not from Iowa, but from other schools. These guys have a better idea kind of what they're looking for, I think, rather than a high school kid who's coming out and has no exposure to what college football is like. You look at an Eric All from Michigan, who's been in a Power Five and blue blood program, Cade McNamara. They know kind of what they're looking for now, and you hope that leads to success for them. That ultimately, you hope all of these guys find better places. It's not going to happen. It's not. There's not a Pollyanna belief here that everything's going to work out for everybody. There are going to be guys that get in that portal and don't come out. It's inexact, and it can be a really negative life experience for some of these guys. But you hope most of them, and close to as all of them as you can, have a good experience out of that. And I think Eric All's certainly an interesting case in that. Highly regarded kid at, I think, Cincinnati, going to Michigan, and friends with McNamara. He'll be here this weekend. I saw Cincinnati Enquirer had a story that he's down to 3, I think. Iowa, Washington, and Notre Dame. Do I have that right, Scott?
I think that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So again, you've got a guy going for Michigan, looking at 3 Power 5 schools, and you just hope he makes the best decision for himself.
Well, you look at, his situation, he got hurt after 3 games. And, last year he had a very good year, productive year on the Big Ten champions. This year he got hurt, had a back surgery. He's just not going to be able to play. They've got a couple of really good tight ends there because they're Michigan. They recruit good players, and he was looking for a different start. It could be at Iowa. It could be with Cade McNamara, and that's up to the Iowa staff to sell that, not just financially, but also to make the case that, hey, you and Luke Lachey could be our version of Hawkinson and Fant. And I went through this because somebody said because Cade McNamara's statements on a podcast that they said, well, they want to open up the offense. How is 2 tight ends opening up the offense? And then I also said, well, you realize in the 2 years that Hawkinson and Fant played together, they combined for 27 touchdown catches. The last 3 years combined, they've had 27 touchdown passes. So you can open up the offense because tight ends are mismatches by their sheer size. Now, if you're a great tight end, you can make that mismatch work, which those 2 did. And I think that's, if you can have Eric All and Luke Lachey next year, that's deadly. And then if you can add a couple of wide receivers who will be on the field, healthy, contributing, and another, some growth on the offensive line, and this offense is going to look a hell of a lot different than it did this year. Even if the scheme doesn't change a whole lot, I expect the scheme to change quite a bit through the air. But all that being said, and I forgot where I was really starting with this, but you do have to take every case on itself. I mean, even the wide receivers. Let's take a gander there. Arlen Bruce, the 4th. Did he really fit with Iowa's offense? Did they use him effectively to what his skill set is? I would say no. I think he's
Wasn't
a guy
he kind of a repeat of Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah. Exactly. And some of it wasn't necessarily Iowa's fault because they ran into, such not only attrition once Charlie Jones left and everything, but the injury issue. He was the only one who really stayed kind of healthy through most of the year. So in his case, does he fit? Does he, would another offense work for him? Probably. It's really unfortunate because I really like the kid. I think he's a fantastic young man and, moved to Iowa his senior year, played football in the state, had to go through an appeal process just to play and everything. And then the other one, Keegan Johnson, he played 21 snaps this year. I think he has really high ability. It's been a wild ride for him. You hope he finds a good home. But and then the other factor in big picture is a lot of these transfers they got their recruiting during COVID. They played during COVID. They didn't get to visit a lot of these schools. they did, and it was just an unofficial, or it was very quick last year. All this, is really now starting to come to the forefront that, and then you have a lot of movement among the coaching staffs. It's just to be expected. So I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Not suggesting that anybody at Iowa had that issue, but I think that's, you got to take each one of these cases one by one, not holistically right now.
Yes, agreed. And there can be a number of reasons. Don't feel like you're a fit in the system, not happy with the system, not playing enough. You look at somebody like Reggie Bracey, who has been a really good special teams player. And we've talked about this a lot, Scott. You have guys like Devontae Young or Dallas Craddoth who are okay with that role.
Yeah.
And they just kind of go through the process. And then there are other guys that are like, hey, and I think now with the landscape the way it is with the transfer portal, we'll probably see more of the guys that go because they have 2 or 3 years to play with. They've gotten their feet wet on special teams at Iowa, and they can go somewhere. And at least in their mind, they're going to go somewhere and be able to be a starter on defense or offense, whatever the case may be. And that's fine. We've talked about that before. I mean, there are only so many positions available, and Iowa historically, especially in recent history, has a very deep secondary, and there are only so many spots available. We talked about Sebastian Castro, who was stuck in the depth chart behind injury. He gets in this year, so he gets to play. Who knows? If he doesn't get to play, maybe he's a guy that's in the transfer portal right now. We don't know those things. So it's not there are circumstances. There usually are usually more than one thing.
Well, exactly. I mean, and when you look at Reggie Bracey, he's from Alabama. He came here, he played well. He didn't redshirt. He had 3 years and played special teams. He'll have 2 years to play because one of the years
special teams play.
Yeah,
very
good.
Important part of the special teams.
And he's like a lot of them where I think he could have played. If they needed him to play, I think he would have played and played well. Is he as good as Kayvon Merriweather? No. Is he as good as Quinn Schulte? Well, Phil Parker determined no. And then you look at Xavier Wampa, that guy's not going to sit on the bench. I mean, you got to get him on the field. And you think about it, well, would you rather have him play over Wampa? Well, no, because he's a 5-star and he's from the state of Iowa, and he will transfer probably at that point. So you just got to say, all right. Well, when you look at the corner position is a little bit more problematic to some extent, but I think Cooper DeJean proved this year he could play that role. And now it's a matter of, Jamari Harris, he was out all year. I thought he was an ascending player at the end of last year. He had 4 interceptions. That Kentucky game, he played his best game, had an interception in it, got hurt, couldn't play this year. He's going to come back. He's probably going to be a starter. But then you look at some of the guys behind him, if you're Terry Roberts and this is going into your 6th year, are you saying, I don't want to be the third corner. I want to start. And this isn't the place for me, that way. And he's got. He
could have been. I mean, they could have. Cooper started at Cash, and then moved over when Terry got hurt, right? And then Sebastian came in. So, I mean, there was a chance Terry could have been the starting quarterback opposite Harris next year, but there was no guarantee that was going to happen. And there could have been some other circumstances during the season that led Terry to the transfer portal, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are things that happen with everybody. So I think in his case, you talk about a special teamer. I don't know that I've seen a better one than him. I think he was as good of a gunner, especially on punt team, as any player I've ever seen in Iowa.
And Iowa could play him next year.
Yeah.
He's got offers from Minnesota and Penn State right now, both on Iowa's schedule next season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I saw that. And I also saw, a bunch of G5s, I think, and so he's got to determine, what's the situation with Minnesota? What's the situation at Penn State? Will he go in? Would he be a starter? Would he be a depth guy? Would he, does he want to automatically start? Because this is his last chance to prove that he could play in the NFL. And if he had a role similar to what he had at Iowa, then there's really no use. Even though the ego may say, yeah, I want to go to Penn State, but
back home, that's the
yeah.
school you grew up, that's the big
Yeah.
school in his state. He's from Erie, for those that don't know.
Right. Or do you say, well, I could go there, but what if I'm second team and I'm on special teams? I might as well just stay at Iowa for that. So he's got to determine what's his best future, and he'll find it. He's a good player, and if he stays healthy, that's been an issue too the last 2 years, whether it's Iowa's fault or his fault. It's or nobody's fault. It's just a matter of the way it works. But so and then Josh Volk, like I said, didn't even make the 105. So that's kind of he needs to find a spot where he can play if he wants to play. And I don't know.
That's important too, because Josh wasn't a 5-star recruit, but he had quite a bit of interest and good offers coming out of Cedar Rapids Xavier. And he may go somewhere and find, a really good fit for him. And that's what you hope. And there are no guarantees in recruiting, whether you're getting somebody out of high school or some guys that we're talking about in the transfer portal. I mean, there's no guarantee Cade McNamara is going to come here and succeed. You hope that's the case. You have evidence that he can succeed, but that doesn't mean that he will. That's why, again, I'm taking the wait and see approach. Show me the money. Yeah. Show me the money next September.
Yeah, there you go. I think it's reasonable to suggest that they probably will be better on offense, because I just don't think there's a way they could be worse.
Could you imagine if it's worse, what it would be like around here?
No. I will volunteer happily to go cover something different. I'd rather cover Iowa State because they don't bitch as much about their offense. Theirs wasn't any good either.
No.
But and then you look at Gavin, who was a stand-up guy, I think well-liked guy, well-respected guy, but
I think that's a common theme with most of the guys that are leaving Iowa. They're all good guys. Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce. I enjoyed my time interviewing all of these guys.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I'll say for Iowa is, we could probably say this on here. They haven't really recruited a lot of shitheads.
No.
And we've been around them a few times, in the past, whether it's football or basketball, but by and large, they do a pretty good job of getting high level human beings on their team. And that's why, you hear us and everybody else saying, we wish them well, because they are good kids and good people. And, whether it's fans being frustrated, they don't know them as people, but we do. So we can kind of vouch for that. But you look at Gavin, and he got passed up by a really good young running back, Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson's going to be, a 3-year starter, maybe longer, and then you look at LaShawn Williams. I thought he was better too. And so they're recruiting.
And you don't know how much of that has to do with Gavin's health. If he was fully healthy, if he would have showed better, but it is what it is. Again, circumstances, factors. There are, maybe if he's not hurt, Caleb Johnson doesn't get the opportunity that he gets, at least at that point of the season. So remember how long it took Tyler Goodson to get in his true freshman year before, what was it, the Minnesota game before he got to start?
Yeah, it was the Minnesota game. I mean, they had him, Mekhi Sargent, and I think Torin Young were kind of rotating, and it's understandable with the true freshmen to kind of slow it down because they got other responsibilities besides running the ball. But I think in this case, we see the production and the ability for Caleb Johnson. I think we can, I thought LaShawn Williams, he reminds me of Adam Robinson, just a really good blue collar running back that I think will, play well. And then they're recruiting at that position too. I mean, they're recruiting transfers and stuff.
Jazion Patterson was a 4-star out of Florida. We don't know what they have in him. The coaches know what they have in him, but we haven't really seen him.
The small doses I've seen of him, I like him.
Yep.
So, and he might be pretty good long term, maybe another year in the system, I think they kind of wanted to preserve his red shirt, if nothing else. But although in this day and age, it doesn't really matter anymore. No. Just play who could play. But I think, with Gavin Williams, he was looking at 3rd, 4th team next year. And, I think that's when you've got to make that evaluation. Are you here for something besides just playing on Saturday or what? And it's not selfish, it's a healthy selfish feeling to say, I got to evaluate what's best for me because my time is limited. And as we've said, Dallas Braddock, he stayed. Devontae Young, he stayed. and Reggie Bracey's looking out for, hey, I want to make sure I get the most out of my college football career. And there's nothing at all wrong with that.
No, there's no right and wrong. It's up to each individual to decide what his path is going to be. And there are more possibilities now with the immediate eligibility. It's different. It's just a different landscape. And we're going to see this more. This is going to be more. I don't know if Iowa's going to have this many kids go into the transfer portal every year. They may. I don't know. We're just going to have to see how this plays out over time, because we could see over time that kids become more cautious about going into the transfer portal for fear of being a casualty that we'll see this year. And we see that. I think basketball is a little bit ahead. We've seen this more in basketball. This is kind of shadowing what basketball has done, mimicking what basketball's done before, just in terms of the amount of kids that are in the transfer portal. But sticking with running back, Arlen Harris out of St. Louis, Iowa was very much in the picture for him coming out of high school. And he ended up going to Stanford, and believe he visited Iowa State and Iowa last week. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Or he didn't. Maybe he missed the Iowa one, and he was coming maybe it's this weekend or next weekend or something. Yeah.
I know Iowa's involved.
Yeah, Iowa's definitely involved. And you look at him and the kind of specimen he is, and hey, you could treat him like a graduate transfer because his staff has been fired or let go or quit or whatever with David Shaw. So I think, this is what it's for too, is somebody who went there largely because of their coach, although Stanford's academics, you don't get much better than that. I think you've got to also figure on, finding a guy. And if Arlen Harris shows up, that's great. They offered Cedric Benson's cousin, I want to say, or also. So I mean, they're attacking it. And I know Arnold Barnes wants to get back in, but that seems like they've kind of moved on. Which is also the danger of in his case that he got sold a vision by Mickey Joseph, and Mickey Joseph, of course, is no longer with Nebraska and won't be after domestic assault arrest. And and now he wants back. Well, that ship sailed, so now he's going to have to go somewhere else. So it's just, the thing is, I think it was 15% of all people who entered the transfer portal didn't end up without a chair at the end. But we've got more than 1,000 players in the first 2 days that entered the transfer portal. So you're looking at just that number alone. That's 150 who won't end up places. You look at Deuce Hogan last year, left Iowa. No offers. He's a walk-on at Kentucky, and he's, now third team, but he was fourth team before that. You look at Charlie Jones, did the same thing in Buffalo. Couldn't find a scholarship, so he had to walk on at Iowa, and now he's an All-American wide receiver. But so there's going to be a lot of, I think there is going to be some pause that some of these players are going to have in the future of just letting this isn't all roses and ice cream. You didn't play right away. You may want to stick this out because your best shot is here, or you may not find a home. And then that's the travesty of it all, is just not being able to, get a scholarship for school, if nothing else, because then that's costly. But when you have these holdovers, because the COVID holdovers are going to still be there for a few more years, that floods the market even more. So you've got to be careful, because, a lot of coaches, maybe they don't try to do this, maybe they do, but, a lot of times they try to cut off those who aren't contributing to make their rosters stronger.
Another intriguing one for me, Scott, is Seth Anderson, wide receiver, Flipper Anderson's son. Did you cover Flipper Anderson, or was he too old for you?
I don't think I did. I covered a Rams game in '95, and I'm not sure if he was there or not, but I think he's, but I remember it vividly, and I remember that big game vividly. So, yeah, that's
Seth is out of Charleston Southern, which is an FCS program. Was he a freshman All-American this year? I have that right. I apologize to folks. Yeah. I've been trying to keep track of a lot of different players, and I'm getting them mixed up. But he's definitely one of the top targets on the receiver market.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think he's he's really good because was freshman of the year for his conference, the Big South, and there are a lot of really good candidates. He went to Tyler Goodson's high school, so North Gwinnett in Atlanta area, and Sewanee, Georgia, actually, and so yeah, he's got production. Certainly got bloodlines, and Kirk likes the bloodlines part of everything when it comes to this. So if you can get him in the fold, you take him, because I think he's got a chance to really explode. It's, most of his offers right now are G5. So if Iowa can sneak in there and get it going, and, I obviously they've got to preface everything by saying, yeah, we know we were terrible, but you're going to come and turn us around, and we've got a quarterback now, and whatever changes are going to happen, they're going to happen. But Seth Anderson would be a good one. The other one that I really like, and it's from Division II Hillsdale, and that's Isaac Tesla. And his
former home of Zach Van Valkenburg.
Exactly. And for some reason, I still keep getting letters from them. I don't know why, but I do. But how his tape is off the charts. So I think he'd be a guy that, and again, that's not going to necessarily wow the fans that are very superficial.
It's not Trajan Holden.
No, it's not an Alabama guy. Oh, my God. It's Hillsdale and Charleston Southern. But I think what you look at and say, can they play? Yeah. Okay. Because Iowa's made do with walk-ons, and these
Charlie
players.
Jones.
Yeah, Charlie Jones was a nice walk-on, and Nick Easley, had 100 catches in 2 years, and these guys are excelling at a smaller level, and people miss all the time. We see 5 stars who can't play, and we see no stars like Devin Witherspoon, who's a first-team All-American. So I think that's cornerback. So I think that's right now just it's hard to trust the evaluation of them, but you got to do that a little bit.
Yeah, and wanted to hit on it. I definitely want to talk about Spencer before we're done, because his Iowa career has come to a close, and wanted to talk about him a little bit. But I know you did a story yesterday, kind of on a roster update and where things were, unit by unit. The most fascinating thing to me out of all of this, Scott, is how Kirk Ferentz is going to manage the roster now with the changing landscape, and if he's going to be able to figure this out and add to his legacy. To me, that's the story. Can he do this? Can he fix the offense? Can he get Iowa back from 7-5 back up into the 9-10 win area here? And it's on a landscape that I think is both unfamiliar to him and uncomfortable for him in certain situations, certain aspects. We wondered about NIL, and it looks like there's some NIL money there now, because you have to have it. And he could fight that off for as long as he wanted to, but eventually he had to give in, and he has, and good for him. I just want to see kind of how he navigates this whole thing.
No question, because this isn't very uncomfortable. I mean, we're talking about a guy a few years ago who wouldn't let, a 4-star running back who would have definitely helped them, just take a visit, and then voila, you're gone, that type of thing. So I think overall you're looking at some really, some big changes. And I've wondered, even, going back 2 years ago with all the stuff that happened through now, how is he going to be able to adapt? And he has, to his credit. Now, is it far enough? That's debatable. But we don't have to debate that today. No, but I think
we have a long off season.
Yeah. But I think overall, you're looking at a team that's been very successful and, has the third most wins, tied for third most wins in the Big Ten the last 5 years. So it's competed at a pretty high level. It's beaten every team in the Big Ten, since what? I think since 2016, so it's won bowl games. It's won 10 games. It's been ranked and, pretty highly. So I think that's got, still some potential, but, any backsliding, people are going to take advantage of it. And when you look at this division, and it won't be their division much longer, but PJ just got extended yesterday. Luke Fickell, a renowned head coach. Matt Rule has had a great career. Bielema, we know how good he can be. Pat Fitzgerald is an outstanding coach despite what the talent says, and he's making changes. Now there's a big hole at Purdue now, a major hole, I think, but still, you've got to adapt, in this era of growth. And at any time he could step down. Anytime he can say, you know what, this is too much. I just don't want to do it. But he hasn't. So if you're going to be in the game, you got to play the game. And, whether it's NIL, whether it's transfer portal, it's not comfortable. But you know what? Iowa asks its players to get out of the comfort zone. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable, I hear a lot. And so that goes straight to the head coach on that one. And that's going to be offense strategy. And that's going to also be with player acquisition. And, that's where we are right now. And I think that, I don't think I recommend running players off per se, but, and I know they're pretty honest with them anyway and direct, but, when you get to about your third year, you really need to hear, all right, do you have a path to playing, or is it not going to happen for you? And I think maybe that's fair. And I know they had some direct conversations last week because they had time because of the dead zone before the recruiting period that they were able to, and that probably influenced a couple of the guys to hit the portal. That's like, look, well, you're going to be behind him and him, and we're just telling you how it is. We'd love to have you, but this is just the way it is. And you got to decide what you want to do, because if you're here, you're all in. If you're not, that's not going to help anybody, not yourself especially.
I think the interesting part is the locker room dynamic, the culture, the coming to Iowa and earning your stripes, walk-on or scholarship player. Everybody's on a level playing field. Well, now you've got somebody coming in from Michigan who's going to be your quarterback that's gotten some benefits for doing so. Does that rub somebody on the roster who's already, worked hard to get to where he is and help the team? Do you have to allocate funds, Scott? Do you have a certain budget and say, hey, we need to allocate funds to offense because that's where we really need the help? And does that cost you on defense? This is fascinating. You said the word free agent before, and this is it. We're watching in Major League Baseball now. Silly money being thrown around and people saying, all right, well, we have a need here, so we have to address that. And that could cost us in another spot. This is crazy.
What, 9 million, 360 million for 9 years?
He bet on himself, man.
Yeah,
good for him.
He did. He made a lot of money, didn't he? Higher tax. Well, he's probably the same tax bracket. Just
here come the judge.
Yeah,
here come the judge.
You got to pay that guy. You had to. If you're the Yankees, he's the face of your franchise. But you're right. I mean, they're going to have to figure out how to allocate that money and those resources. And I've always said with Iowa that with the freshmen, you only have to worry about a few. I think most of them, the 3-star from within the state of Iowa, who you think are all right, they're exactly the kind of players they want. They'll understand that. Hey, here's a minimum standard. If you go out for the charities and do all that charity work, you're going to get this. The other stuff comes separately when you earn it, and so you deal with that. And
we see Cooper DeJean cashing in a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely, and he totally deserves it.
Yep.
But you look at, there's a 5-star tackle that's different. And you have to realize that. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be whispers. That doesn't mean that when he goes head-to-head with Lucas Van Ness in practice, he's not going to take the young buck to the woodshed, because he's gonna, and they're all going to do that. But, that's fair. It's just, you hope it doesn't spill over to the locker room. You hope that nobody comes across as too important. So, with the ego, that's probably what Kirk fears the most, but that's, again, the system that's been set up. And
that's the hard thing, right? If you pay, a 5-star to come in and he's not performing you said it earlier in the podcast, there are plenty of 4 and 5 stars that don't work out, but they got a chunk coming in here and they're getting their asses kicked every day by somebody who walked on,
Yeah.
You have to manage that as a coach.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you look at just let's call it, Dallas Kraft was a 4-star, and Kayvon Merriweather was a 2-star. Kayvon Merriweather is going to go to the NFL, and Dallas Kraft is a great guy, a great teammate, got a degree from a great university, but he's not going to the NFL. In the NIL period, maybe that would have changed some things. But, if the walk-on isn't compensated, then he goes to Purdue, or he goes somewhere else. And I think that's where things you have to differentiate some of this stuff. And so, it's going to be interesting roster building here, everywhere else. But I think the worst possible thing is for Iowa just to ignore it.
Yeah.
You could risk some locker room issues if you have a strong locker room and you encourage leadership. They do. They have great character in this program, this team. So they're going to be able to come out fine. But I think overall what you got to do is encourage the team aspect. And let's face it, if nothing else, they're losing great leadership this year. I mean, Jack Campbell's as good as they've ever had. I think Sam Laporta is a heck of a leader. And, say what you will about his performance, but Spencer Petras is a heck of a leader too. So they're going to Kayvon as good as it gets. So, they've got Riley Moss was a captain. So they have the guys that are exiting, and they're going to have to fill that vacuum with players who are not only holdovers, but players who are newcomers. And Cade McNamara could probably fit that. He's a quarterback. He's had success. People are going to look to him. It's just going to be a matter of, can Lucas Van Ness fill that, hole? Can Cooper DeJean fill that hole? And he's been a quiet guy, and performance in a lot of cases dictate that as well.
Yes. And we haven't heard a lot in the portal about offensive linemen. Does that surprise you?
I've heard a little bit.
A little, not a lot though.
Not a lot. I heard interest more than that they're interested in the Alabama guys. They're interested in the Oklahoma guy and that sort of thing. But, that doesn't lead to visits or anything else like that. And I know like the Arizona State offensive lineman entered the portal and then a day later he committed to Michigan. So, they're going to have to, I think you got to at least get one. Because I think that you just need to get better and you want to keep your quarterback upright. And, wasn't a great year. It was the worst year that I can remember in a long, long time. Maybe 2007 was about as close to this year as I can remember. But you've got to, I think they need to hit that. But, they still have time, and, there are still good players. There's going to be a bunch of good players out there, and maybe they're just evaluating them because they're trying to be careful.
Some defensive backs from Harvard. That's always good. You're not going to have academic issues. Who was it? Alex Washington? Is he the one that Phil was offered yesterday?
Yeah.
Visited and offered?
Yeah. Yeah. He was there and he had the Jim Rome show on in the background.
Yeah, I saw that too. That was classic. I thought we were back in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But he was talking to Sean Clifford. So I'm like, all right, he's excuse him. He's talking to somebody from the, he's listening to somebody from the conference on there. But yeah, that's, I don't know. It's funny because, we talked a little bit about this before we, hopped on here. And you'd think with a week where Iowa men played Duke and Madison Square Garden, playing Iowa State tonight. The women played Iowa State in a highly ranked, highly anticipated matchup last night. And the bowl game got announced. And the starting quarterback isn't going to play because he's injured and had to have surgery. Yet none of that compares to the transfer portal. It just shows you football is king, period. Even in Iowa where it's been a little more balanced than other places, the transfer portal player acquisition in football is the most talked about topic there is. In
no matter how much people bitch about it.
Yeah.
They're still interested. They're still looking who Iowa's interested in, who Iowa's going to get. You can go, this is going to ruin college football, but you're still there. You're still clicking refresh on that transfer portal. page and looking to see who's going in there
Yeah.
and who Iowa may get. You're going in there and going, okay, let's look at the wide receivers that are in there
Yeah.
and figure out who Iowa might get, because it's interesting. It is
Yeah.
interesting. Everybody likes the shiny new toys. It's almost Christmas.
Well, there's a reason why the NFL draft outrates the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
And the first few days of the NFL free agency period in March are off the charts as far as interest. In our case, both of ththose provide us with some of our highest metrics of the year because everybody's a part of it. It's not, like the draft, we always, kind of laughed at, used to be like Cleveland Super Bowl, because they get like the first or second pick in the draft. And then but that's true. I mean, and like free agency, it's, you can chart your own course and people want to know, okay, well, who's Iowa looking at? Who's after a disappointing year, especially on offense. I mean, this is exciting, player acquisition. And so is it amateurism the way we once knew it? Absolutely not. But you know what? It's far more interesting because, remember, it wasn't that long ago before the early signing period, Rob, and this would just be, coaches going out and flying and driving and taking pictures, and you're hoping for a commitment just to write about some kid, some 3-star from Erie, Pennsylvania, or Connecticut, or
Yeah.
Maybe they finally offered that small town kid in Iowa that 2-star. It's just stuff like that. Now it's hyper.
There was a time when this beginning of December was the big official visit weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they would bring. Now they've shifted that to June.
Yeah,
because everything is moving quicker now.
And you notice that the athletes their visits this week, the transfer portal guys start today.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty big reason why, because there's going to be a sold out basketball arena and they're going to I don't know if they can do it, but they're going to do it, I'm sure, and put their faces on the big screen. And, when they're playing Iowa State, and it will be a sold out arena and it will be loud. And when Cade McNamara's face is on that, holy smokes.
And they'll sit them right next to the student section.
Exactly. So they're going to put on a good show, and they want them there. And I think that's really smart. And because then they can say, hey, look at the interest here. This is basketball. Football's sold out all the time. You guys have been here, and it wasn't as loud as it usually was against Michigan this year, but that's because Michigan did that to Iowa too. So they took Iowa out of the game.
Do we want to? Yeah, we'll take the break here. Wanted to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. Also wanted to let folks know of Urban Acres. They've come on board recently. We're in the process of trying to get a read and or a recording for them spot that we can plop in here. But Urban Acres, for all your real estate needs, we appreciate their support as well. And Scott and I are going to take a little break here so you guys can hear from a few more of our sponsors, and then we'll be back on the other side to power through the rest of the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Welcome back to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. We thank our sponsors, one and all. We found out Sunday when Kirk Ferentz met with the media, Scott, as you had mentioned, that the 3-year starting quarterback for Iowa, Spencer Petras, would not be playing in the bowl game. Will Levis, the starting quarterback for Kentucky, also is not playing in the bowl game for a different reason. He is sitting out, and likely first-round draft pick, and smart move on his part. Looks like we're going to get Joey Labus or Carson May. I would think that Labus has certainly a leg up here. How important is this, do you think, for Labus if they play both of them? What's the significance, and how much can these guys show the coaches on this stage?
I think that whoever wins this, competition, and who knows how, if both of them will play, one will play the whole time or whatever. But I think whoever wins this is certainly going to be the number 2 next year, behind Cade McNamara. And it also shows that they've gained the trust of the coaching staff a little bit more than the other guy, and it's going to be a competition. And then you throw Marco Lainez in there. Next year it's going to be, fairly involved. And I think whatever happens will help the team, will help those two in particular, but really start to move forward. It's going to be, this is an interesting game to say the least, because the over-under, Rob, was 32.5 before the announcement yesterday from Will Levis. And you're looking at two offenses that were in the 100s in just about every major category except passing for Kentucky. And now you take out the reason for that. And then you look at defensively, they're both excellent, stout units. I mean, this is going to come down to turnovers. So it's going to be about, can whoever it is get the snap from center, because that's been a kind of a hiccup in its own right, hand the ball off, don't throw it to the other team. And punting isn't a sin. So I don't know that the performance in the game matters nearly as much as what happens in practice going into the game.
Yeah, for sure. This is a big month for everybody for that. This is kind of a lot of work with the younger guys set aside during bowl prep to kind of get a look at what you have there. And then, guys trying to position themselves for the spring, and then that's the next kind of proving ground after winter conditioning. But this is bowl prep's big. You get a chance to kind of get a different eye on guys, different evaluation. Guys get to impress the coaches and maybe open eyes that they didn't get to during the fall when you were week after week preparing for games. So obviously big for the offensive line, I would think, this month. Young linebackers, Scott, with Jack and Justin moving on. We don't know what Seth Benson's going to do, but there's opportunity there. Big for Xavier Wonkpa. This could be a really big. There are a lot of guys that could really take a step forward this month.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why they fight so hard to get to bowl eligibility, are these practices, because it's a start on next year. And the game kind of reflects that a little bit, but it's really about making sure that, there's a lot of guys that are on the border of being with the varsity or being with the scout team. And now you get a chance to really see them for, 7, 8, 9, 10 practices compete, doing Iowa things. And for some of the linemen or some of the, other players that haven't really had a chance to show what they can do now, oh, wow, he's taking a step up. And every year there seems to be one player who kind of, I don't say they jump off the page, but they turn some heads. And I think that's really important. And the linebackers, as you said, I think it's critical, because now without Justin Jacobs there, Jay Higgins is definitely going to be a starter, but who starts alongside with him? And, looking at the depth chart now, Rob, I mean, they have two guys who are going to be seniors and the rest are going to be, underclassmen, and that's not saying what'll happen in the portal or whatever, but you have Jay Higgins and Kyler Fisher, who is a really good special teamer and backup. But then you have, 6 different recruits the last 2 years. And really only Carson Shire had kind of taken a step forward. But, Jaden Harrell was mentioned a little bit, but he's probably more third team. Zach Tweet, they like a lot, but hasn't really taken that step. Justice Sullivan's, he's been sick a lot, And then now they do like Landon Van Kekerix. but he's true freshman. And I don't know, is Jade Montgomery had a chance to compete. I don't know if he's been a scout teamer or if he's still kind of recovering. And then Jackson Rexroth has competed on a lot of special teams, and he's moved to linebacker. And so you've got that. They've got to find some depth, because as we've seen, injuries happen, and you're going to need 4, 5, 6 linebackers to get through a season. And so a couple of those are going to have to step up. Now, there are a lot of seniors, and from the realistic ones that you think, boy, it'd be good if they return. I think after Justin Jacobs announced he's leaving, you might want to organize an NIL package for Seth Benson, because if you can have him and Jacobs playing side by side another year, I think you're in really good shape. And I would say him, and if you can get Nico Ragaini. I don't know that that's possible because he's been around forever, but I think I would put a full court press on that one.
Yeah, Benson to me is a really interesting one because it really changes the complexion of that linebacker unit if you have him back. It like night and day, I think, unless you can get somebody out of the portal that can kind of fill that role, but still you don't have somebody who's that seasoned in the defense, and is, would clearly be the leader of the defense. I mean, it's the guy who, my guess is Seth Benson will be a captain if he comes back next year. So that's the importance of that. I'm looking through the recruiting class now, Scott, and I don't know, are there any of these guys that Ben Keeter, obviously, but is he a guy that's going to be able to come in and play right away next year? Maybe. He's a 2-sport guy. Then you've got some, guys that are coming in as athletes. Aiden Hall, probably more of a cash than he would be a linebacker. So not a lot in the class either. Possibilities there, kind of the same as wide receivers. So we'll see. That's certainly a portal possibility, depending on what Seth decides and how they feel about some of those guys, Harrell and Scherer and Van Kekerix, and go down the list, Zach Tweet. I mean, these are all guys they liked in recruiting. How have they developed? We don't really know.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the other part, is that when you look at, Seth Benson, he was a second team all Big Ten linebacker, and he was generally, it appears that he was number 5 in votes. And you look at the others above him, and they're the first teamers, Jack Campbell, gone. Nick Herbig, gone. Tommy Eichenberg, probably gone. He's a junior, but he's an NFL guy, probably, unless he was to return. And then, Cal Halliday is the only other one that's really alongside him that's got similar credentials. So you put him back, it's comparable to Josie Jewell, and I'm not going to say that he's Josie Jewell, but he's a really good player. He's a guy everybody looks to. I mean, let's face it, if it wasn't for Jack Campbell alongside him, he would be a team captain. He'd be all those things. Now, in his case, maybe he's looking at, I could go to the NFL, and I think in his eyes, he has to evaluate what his potential would be there, what the benefits of another year would be, what he could, all those types of things are really important. But, and I think, if there's one guy on the market that they're really gunning for, it's Ernest Hausman, a true freshman from Nebraska who entered the portal. I know they like him. And if you had him and say he's your Leo who sometimes gets reps inside, then you kind of have what you had this year. And then it's about building at least one or two of those other young guys into a key role. And, again, still try to get Asa Newsome. He's still out there.
Yeah. He got, I think he's visiting Kentucky this weekend.
Okay.
So another school that kind of entered the fray for him. So we'll kind of see how that plays out over the next several weeks, but obviously a key target from the high school ranks for Iowa. And then Hausman, I remember covering during recruiting. He liked Iowa quite a bit during recruiting. So we'll see what they can do with him. Very good athlete, super athlete. Kind of in the Jacobs mold of a guy that can run sideline to sideline and fill that Leo spot. So yeah, we'll see how that shakes out as well. Spencer Petras, Scott, his Iowa career has come to a close. How will it be remembered? That's a loaded question.
Yeah, wow. You know, that's it's going to be remembered.
How will he remember it too?
Yeah. I'm sure that the majority of fans will remember it for not being very successful statistically. And I'm sure he's going to remember it fondly for his teammates and the wins and the memories. I don't know that the bridge is going to be there for the fans to remember him fondly. And that's a shame, because I think he's maybe the most accountable athlete I've ever been around. Just a fantastic young man who has a lot to offer in football. I think he's going to be a great coach, potentially offensive coordinator someday. Handles himself so well and really exudes a lot of leadership and has grown and matured over the years. So I hope that I'm glad people on his senior day cheered him. I really am. I think that's an important step. But I think he's also, somebody who's fans are probably going to look the other way on some things. And we've seen athletes like that in other sports before. One that kind of comes to mind in some ways would have been, maybe Woodbury and Gazelle. Woodbury had even more high expectations. But let's say Mike Gazelle had a really nice career at Iowa. They did some really good things while he was here. Did not reach the expectations that fans had for him, and he probably had for himself on a statistical level. But I think that's maybe where Spencer is, that, they got to number 2 with him at quarterback. They won 20 games with him at quarterback. Did he have a lot to do with it? He had something to do with it. They don't win them all without him. But statistics are going to probably cloud most of his memories. What about you? What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that was good analysis of where things are and what it's going to be like. Time does heal some wounds. I know Matt Sherman had a pretty tough go of it here. He was that was kind of when I was starting, when he was finishing up, and I remember talking to him his senior year. I think it was before the Sun Bowl, maybe. And then I ended up doing a story on him within the last few years. So, roughly a 20-year window. And he talked about it. He talked about, he was bitter for a long time. And the way he was treated, I think there was a column written in the DI back in the day that tore him apart pretty good and led to Tim Dwight going into the DI offices and wanting to talk to the writer. So old story there. But I think over time, Spencer, he loves the university. He cared. You could tell how much he cared when he'd come into a post game with, watery eyes, how much it bothered him to not be able to perform the way everybody wanted him to perform. Nobody more than him. And,
right.
I think for now, he'll be able to compartmentalize and say, hey, I've made friendships that will last a lifetime in this locker room. And that's what I want to remember and think about as during my time at Iowa. Then there's going to be the booze, the social media vitriol, all that other stuff that got to him and his parents that he's going to have to let time heal if it can heal. But that's kind of the way I view it.
Yeah, you're right. And that's going to be tough, because it's probably going to be less difficult for him because he's been able to stay above the fray for so long on that. And I respect the hell out of him for it, because it would be really tough. Because people they booed him, they hated him. Social media was a pit. And yet he still he handled himself like a pro, better than just about anybody I've ever remembered. For his family, that's going to be different, because, you can boo the hell out of me or call me names, but you say it about my son, then I feel completely different. And I will, and so that's going to be difficult. But I hope that I hope people respect him for what he did. Just because he didn't perform on the field the way you wanted him to doesn't mean that he's a failure in life or in football, because again, I don't know. I'm sure he's going to try to go to the next level if he can. I'm sure the shoulder surgery will prevent that to some degree, at least throughout the spring. But if he can get to, I think if he can be like a GA somewhere, if football doesn't work out for him, to at least give it a shot. And I can see him being a quarterback coach by the time he's 30 at a major school, maybe an OC, maybe even a head coach, if that's the path he wants to take, because he is well versed in the game, better than, you look at all the guys who've come before him. Nate Stanley was very analytical, but didn't necessarily communicate it very well. CJ Beathard knew the game really well, but he was kind of Brett Favre-ish. Yeah. He's still got a career. He might even start this weekend if Trevor Lawrence can't go. Jake Rudock was similar to me, I think, as Spencer Petras. Performed a little bit better. Went to the NFL now. He wants to be a doctor. Stanzi performed better, but I think Spencer, just the way he just can describe it and analyze it, is at a different level from all of them.
Yeah, incredible football IQ. I always learn something talking to him each week, and certainly appreciated. The setup at Iowa is that the assistant coaches don't talk weekly about successes or failures on the field, but the quarterback does. And he showed up every week, handled tough questions professionally, even though he isn't a professional. And I'll remember him fondly, Scott. I don't know, I kind of I've gotten to the point now where I kind of tune out fans, whether it's friends who rip them and, and I have my own feelings about Spencer, and appreciated him here, and always rooted for him. I'll admit it. I mean, I'm objective, and I always tell people I am not an Iowa fan, but I certainly can root for some of the guys that I get to know during recruiting and while they're here. And he certainly was one of those guys. I root for most of them. I like to see them succeed. It's fun for me to watch them enjoy success.
We get to know them, Rob. You get to, through recruiting when they're young, really young, they're teenagers, to when they first arrive, to when you see them arrive and they're, whatever height and weight. And then all of a sudden, boom, they turn into, tough dudes. And then we see.
I remember skinny Jack Campbell at Cedar Falls when I went out and watched him when he was a junior. And I'm like, man, is he going to be able to fill out at the next level?
Right. Exactly. What was it? Anthony Nelson, his first year, he gained 35 pounds. And, so you see them as young men. You see them there. You talk to their parents, you get to know them as people through their interviews each week, and then side conversations and what have you. You see them grow, get better, improve on the field, but just, you ask questions about their lives. And a lot of times we have questions and we just talk to them. And so it's easy to root for them as people. And when you see how good they are as human beings, then it becomes even more, you develop, somewhat of a bond, and you want them to succeed, whether that's in football or graduate, or, you want people to cheer for them. I mean, some of the bigger, in growth, one that always stands out to me is Kayvon Merriweather. He always had that leadership ability, but as he improved on the field, he was able to kind of bring it out. He's our inaugural winner of the Duke Slater Award, the Golden Gavel, because of how he handled himself, not only in just in every area. And then he built upon that to be able to do some of the things he's done. Go to Selma, go to Indianapolis, to be a team captain, a leader, and allow his personality and his growth potential just to soar. And no matter if he goes to training camp next year and gets cut, he's going to be a success in life. And I really like to see that. Now that we're old enough where our kids are their age, you can see it a little bit differently than when either our kids were very young or you didn't have them. And certainly we don't view them as commodities or just, athletes the way we do pros.
Yeah, the transfer portal will be different for us too. We'll be having guys that come in here for a year or two and move on. Guys we don't know, we'll have to get to know a little bit quicker, a little bit more speed dating as the coaches are doing. I think Kirk calls it speed dating. He didn't like the speed dating in high school. Now he's forced to do it through the transfer portal. So we'll dive much more into the Music City Bowl as we move along here. Have some press conferences and research the game a little bit more and see if we can't analyze who's playing and what the outcomes may be. But we'll wait on that maybe till next podcast or the podcast after that. We have some time, and we'll certainly have plenty more recruiting through the portal and high school news coming up the next few weeks. Were you at wrestling on Sunday?
No, I didn't go. That was my bowl day, and not just Iowa bowl day, but that was everything. So I missed it. I missed all the fun.
Yeah, it was unfortunate that was on the same day as the bowl announcements, but did get over there. I shot the whole duel, and it was fun. It was salty at times. There were some words and gestures, and it's nice to see. Kevin Dresser's done a really nice job getting Iowa State back up on its feet. It pushed Iowa. It's a good thing Spencer Lee wrestled. He came back and competed for the first time in about a year. I think Andy Hamilton I sat next to Andy Hamilton shooting photos because he's like an encyclopedia of wrestling. So figure I'll sit next to him and let him, just pepper him and bother him with questions throughout the duel. And he did a nice job analyzing things for me. So check out Andy's work. If you're into wrestling, much more in depth than I'm going to give you. I love shooting wrestling photos, though. It's kind of like there are a few sports that kind of stand out, Scott. Swimming is one. High school swimming is fun as heck to shoot, just with the water and the images. People are probably rolling their eyes on the podcast right now because they're like, what the hell is Howe talking about? But wrestling is one of those sports where you get a lot of emotion. Football's great, but it's hard sometimes with helmets to get facial reactions, and wrestling is fun. And that was a good meet. And it's nice to see Iowa State back up on its feet, competing with Iowa. And Iowa's been pushed so far. Penn pushed Iowa a little bit, and Iowa State pushed it a little bit harder. Yeah,
and Iowa needs that because you've got, they want to be in perfect position to win the national tournament. That's what it's all about, is March with this program. And what happens in December, helps them get to that position. And I think that's really, important. And what happened the other day, I watched Spencer Lee's match, while I was
ran out of gas, came out like his hair was on fire, and then he was sucking wind by the end of that thing.
Yes, I know. I saw it. It was like he was like up like 12-0, and I'm like, okay, this will be a tech fall or a pin, and then then you can see that having a year plus off because he had this ACL a year and a half ago or whatever it was when he tore his ACL and year and 9 months or whatever, in the state tournament or the national tournament, right around there, and won with a torn ACL. And then he had elected January, I think it was, to repair them. And, coming back, he won, but I'm sure he's like, I got a long way to go. And that's not bad. That means, hey, it's good to get a learning experience in, and he probably understands conditioning is going to be a challenge for him, but it's all about March again. And I'm glad to see Iowa State, as you said, get back there because it's got a passionate fan base. This sport needs those. They need their blue bloods or their places that have histories and traditions to be good. And I think Iowa State being good, pushing Iowa to the brink. As you said, Kevin Dresser has done a remarkable job considering where it was before that. And I think that's that's something that the state needs as much as the program and the sport.
Yeah, it's a cool sport. Just and Iowa fans they do a nice job of appreciating really good opponents. Gable Steveson last year, they acknowledged him. David Carr on Sunday from Iowa State, a national champ. He won his match, and they acknowledged him, and it's cool to see. And but Iowa certainly has some work to do. Jacob Warner's match did not go. I think of the 5 matches that Iowa State won, 4 of them were decided by a point, maybe 2 points. They were all really close, and Iowa lost at the end. And that, I'm sure when they went back into the room on Monday, that was the narrative. That was the focus. Hey, we got to be able to finish. Because if you know anything about Tom Brands, it's about finishing.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to be satisfied at all. I mean, and they're going to be pushing harder, and all of them feel that way. So it's no surprise to me. I thought it was, a good meet for Iowa State to come that close, and I think for Iowa they got a lot to learn. But again, I think they're going to Chattanooga this week. So
yep.
I still wish they would wrestle Northern Iowa. I don't know why that's I think that would makes too much sense. I don't know what kind of hard feelings there are with Schwab and the Brands, but either way, I don't care that much enough to really write a column saying they need to do it or else. But
they're at Chattanooga this weekend, getting out of town, which is kind of weird with the World Cup over at Extreme Arena. So if you're a wrestling fan, you probably know this, but if you're looking for something to do this weekend, Extreme Arena, some of the best wrestlers in the world, literally. So go check it out.
Yeah. Well, Iowa and Coralville, Iowa City and Coralville can be wrestling mecca of the world. And I think they're going to try to prove that. And hopefully, I don't know, are they going to get the trials back here in 2024? I can't remember.
I think they've got, if it hasn't been announced, they're going to get a lot of major events here, especially when they complete the addition on Carver Hawkeye Arena and have that as a facility where you can kind of work out and, train, and then have the event either, you can split an event up and have some of it at Carver and some of it at Extreme. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, and I think they're moving towards that. Making, the women's program now getting on its feet, will compete next year. So big things ahead for wrestling, and no better place for that to be than in Iowa City. Good game last night, Scott. Another Cy-Hawk matchup, the women's basketball team. Iowa down 5 at halftime, I think had 23 points at halftime. You're not going to see that a lot from the Iowa women, but a lot of struggles, tough defense, missed shots on both ends, on both sides, Iowa and Iowa State. But Iowa just came out of the locker room and laid it on in the third quarter. I think it was a 19-2 run. I could be off on that, but impressive. And Caitlin Clark hitting from the logo. And I've never seen her as excited as she was after that game on the TV interview. I mean, she was you could tell how important that was to her.
Absolutely it was. And it was fun to watch at the end, as you said. For the first half, neither team could hit anything. And on the second half, Iowa State couldn't hit anything, and Iowa could. I mean, Iowa had a great second half and, got up by as many as 18. They were trailing, by 7, early in the third quarter. So, I mean, and then, they were able to put together a 10-0 run and it really, pushed it forward. But, watching her when she sat down with Deb Antonelli and Beth Mullins. I can't believe I could remember her name. Because I know everybody.
The bane of Iowa fans' existence, Beth Mullins. I never got that, but whatever.
Yeah. Sitting with her, she was just ecstatic. And for her, and her older brother was a walk-on quarterback at Iowa State. She's from West Des Moines, so she's at the epicenter of that rivalry, and they lost last year, and Iowa State's ranked ahead of them, and then they've also struggled. They've lost to some major opponents. They lost at Kansas State, which maybe doesn't qualify as much as UConn and sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit, and NC State. So I think the fact that she was able to get that win and play well in the second half was really important, because she was in rough shape in that first half.
2 for 14, I believe, at halftime.
Yeah, it was nasty. And, Ashley Jones didn't play very well either. We know she has a lot more in her. And they struggled a little bit with Stephanie Suarez. She's such a force in the post, and, really altered a lot of shots, even if she didn't block them necessarily. So I think for them to be able to get out and run, and Kate Martin had one of her best games. I mean, she was really stroking from three. I mean, that was just such a pivotal couple of shots she made. And even the one that didn't count, that went back. And it was, the one that was just like, she was released that three at the buzzer, the third quarter that,
that was the bank shot, wasn't it? That they waved off?
Yeah.
The banked three. And then she came back and hit a three, like a next possession or couple possessions after that. So ball don't lie.
Yeah, exactly. Ball don't lie. Yeah, exactly. So
I think the big thing, Scott, last night is, and the NC State game, I think, was not that they lost to NC State. NC State's a really good team, but their defense was pathetic.
Yeah.
And they have to decide that they want to play defense. They certainly are capable. They're a veteran team. Gabby Marshall is one of the best defensive guards you'll see. Kate Martin is very good defensively. And you saw Caitlin, or heard Caitlin mention it several times in that post-game interview. Defense. They have so many weapons on all. They'll score the ball eventually. You hold them down for a quarter, maybe a half, they're going to score eventually, especially with her. But they have to defend if they want to reach their goals, if they want to reach their ceiling, they have to defend. And we've certainly talked about this a lot on the men's side in recent years.
No question. Because they have, as you said, they have all the scorers that they need to be, I don't know about national champs, but a Final Four caliber team, but they do have to defend, because you're going to face teams that are going to come at you. And Iowa State is a team that's in that same ballpark. They are a very good team. They're a team that Iowa could play somewhere down the road in March. So you've got to learn how to defend, or at least have the will to defend. And sometimes that's going to fade for them because they are so good offensively that they're going to come up and down the floor, and they're going to give up some shots that they normally shouldn't. But you can forgive that. But they, every time that they were coming back against NC State, and Caitlin Clark had some great shots, they give it right back up. And you cannot do that against caliber of competition like Iowa itself. So if they can play that way defensively, maybe not that strong, or maybe they won't, and let's face it, Iowa State did not shoot well either.
No.
Even when they had open shots, they didn't shoot well. So I'm sure Bill Fennelly is kicking himself today going, God, what happened? But that said, they did it. They won. They played well. They got everything they deserved. So, and they out-rebounded Iowa State, which I think was even bigger in some ways. I mean, 40-34. That was huge. And Iowa State shot like crap from the free throw line. Iowa was 9 of 10. So overall, a winning performance in the second half, a very, very good performance. And they needed that confidence boost too. They needed to beat a good team, and winning the Cy-Hawk really helps.
Yep. That's a good one on the resume to have in March when you're trying to host, as they do in women's basketball. So allowed 94 in a 94-81 loss to NC State last Thursday, bounced back with a 102-71 win at Wisconsin on Sunday, 70-57 last night against Iowa State. As we mentioned, this Saturday night, 8:00, they play host to Minnesota in the blackout game. A week from this Sunday, that would be December 18th. They've got next week off for finals. Will be Northern Iowa coming to town. Yes, the women still do play the smaller in-state schools. And then Wednesday, December the 21st, Dartmouth comes to Iowa City in the final non-conference game of the year. And then Iowa will have Purdue coming to Iowa City on Thursday, December 29th, as they dive back into Big Ten play. So, Scott, you've got Minnesota at home, Northern Iowa at home, Dartmouth at home, and Purdue at home. Iowa does not go on the road again until January 1st against Illinois. This is a nice chance to kind of get momentum and head into the new year, getting yourself back up, because let's face it, as you said, top 5 team to start the season, now number 16, they've got work to do. They've got to build themselves back up and get yourself into that solid position where you can host.
You got to get in that position, and you just, in some ways, even more than the postseason, it's just about feeling good about yourself, having some confidence through victory, through performance, playing well, beating a rival, beating a good team, and they were able to do that. So it's like, okay, now you can kind of exhale. The pressure's a little bit off of you, and you can go out and play. Northern Iowa is going to be a test, like Drake was a test.
Yep.
And you know what? This is healthy for them, because they probably had more hype than any other time I can remember. And rightly so. When you won the Big Ten, you won the Big Ten tournament last year, didn't get to the Sweet 16, which they absolutely should have. But all of those things, they still, with Caitlin Clark, top 5 team ranked, preseason player of the year. Now you got to go out and prove it. And you also understand that you are the target, and all these teams are after you because they know the same thing. You're on national TV. You're on ESPN too. That's a big deal. You've been on ABC. That's a big deal too. So all of those things matter. And now Iowa just has to, you're taking everybody's best shot. They're coming at you. And if now that you're winning these games, you understand what it takes. And it's just not going to be out there, and you're not going to be able to just shoot from the logo because you want to, or not take a dribble and score 40 points, the paint, you're going to have to play hard, and you're going to have to win. And, there was a moment late in the game, I think it was 67 seconds left, when Kate Martin's in the huddle, and she's like, we've got 67 seconds. Let's go out. And I don't want to butcher what she said, but it was really impactful. Like, no laying around, come out and be tough. And I think that's really essential for this program, to not let up, keep coming. And Kate Martin is a perfect figure for that. As you said, Gabby Marshall is a good defender. She's always seems to be hitting shots from the corner. But Kate Martin's that gritty, tough, leader, person that you just need to get you through. And I think she's been really a good, and she can be that person for the rest of the season.
No doubt. They've got some nice pieces that come off the bench as well. They've got a complete team. It's just a matter of, can they put it together? And that's kind of the theme of college basketball. Can you grow as the season goes on? Can you peak at the right time? Can you reach your potential by coming together? That's me waxing philosophical there. And I think we have a similar situation on the men's side, Scott, and we'll find out a lot tonight. Iowa State comes to town. That's a 7 p.m. tip. What channel is that on? That is on FS1. 7 o'clock. Who knows when the tip is? 7:02 or something like that.
It says 7:01 right now.
7:01. It better be right at 7:01. I'm going to look at my phone to make sure they tip exactly at 7:01. But Iowa has lost 2 of 3, the latest being a loss at Madison Square Garden in the Jimmy V Classic. 74-62. That is not a lot of points for Iowa, obviously. That was after winning against Georgia Tech in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and that was 81-65. And then they lost their last game down in Niceville to Texas Christian, 79-66. So 2 of the last 3 games, Scott, Iowa's been in the 60s for points, and they'll face probably one of their toughest defensive challenges this season in Iowa State. TJ Otzelberger hangs his hat on D, and they are going to get into the Hawkeyes and Chris Murray tonight.
If Chris Murray can even play, I guess there were sightings last night of him in a walking boot. I don't know if that means anything, if it's just preventing, just.
Thanks for remembering that. I did see that last night. Was it Mark Woodley that saw that? I think Mark Woodley tweeted that. I never saw Chris last night at the arena, but I trust Mark.
Yeah, I trust Mark too. And so, is it just, hey, let's just wear this for now and then we'll see what happens during shoot around on Thursday or whatever. But still, that's problematic because he's a guy that they absolutely need. And I guess he tweaked his ankle and against Duke. And Iowa State is a formidable opponent. This team beat the number one team in the country, beat North Carolina, and beat Villanova earlier this year, and then won against St. John's, who was undefeated the other day. I mean, this is a good team, and then you throw on, rivalry component and everything. I think this could be a real, if Chris Murray can't play or is not effective, this could be a very difficult game again for Iowa. And I thought of this week going all the way through Sunday when they play Wisconsin. It's a very pivotal week for Iowa, and this is going to test them in a lot of ways. And are they going to be able to withstand that and then also prevail?
This is their last resume builder in the non-conference, Scott. This is huge tonight in that regard. And then, as you said, they've got Wisconsin on Sunday, but all that's left after this week is Southeast Missouri State and Eastern Illinois. Yeah. So then at that point, you're looking to build once you get into the Big Ten, and the Big Ten looks pretty. I don't think there are any great teams in the Big Ten this year, but there are a lot of really good teams in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, right. Purdue might, I don't know, for whatever reason, I think of Purdue being a great team or one that can be there, but still, I think Indiana is a good team. As we know in the Big Ten, I think from about team number 4 or 5 every year through about 11, it's pretty damn close. Sometimes it's just one player. We saw
that last week. Rutgers beat Indiana at the rack. Those are tough places to play, man.
Yeah, and Steve Peichel has done an amazing job there because that was a wasteland. His predecessor had left him, and here he is. Turned that place, and they're an NCAA tournament team just about every year, at least in caliber, and they win games there. We've seen it before against Iowa, and this league is very difficult on the road. So, first of all, they're going to have to hold serve Sunday. That game is more important.
Definitely.
Than tonight's. Tonight's is important for bragging rights, and it's important for the fans, but Sunday is more important for the team. But still, it's, this is going to be a hell of a tough game. I mean, when you talk about, they're ranked. Iowa isn't. The only
20th, right?
Yeah,
they're 20th, 21st, something like that. They're in the top 25. Yeah. This is
Yeah, they're 20th. They're 20th in both.
Sweet 16 team from a year ago.
Yeah, they've lost one game to UConn, but that was right after
UConn's 5th, I think.
Yeah, and that's right after, right, and that's after beating North Carolina, who's number 1 at that time. They beat St. John's. They, in their case, it's similar that, they have 3 layups, no pun intended, coming up next. So, and this is Iowa. This is the Cyhawk. We know that this is a big deal, even when it's neither team's any good, let alone when both teams are pretty good. And so, what happens with Chris Murray injury-wise, if he plays or not, and also, that's going to really matter. And home court advantage is going to matter too.
When I watch Iowa right now, it looks like, and this isn't to be unexpected, Scott, because there's turnover in college sports a lot more. Well, pros there are as well, but it seems like a team trying to figure itself out, guys trying to figure out their roles. You've got a new point guard in Aaron Eulis. Tony Perkins is still, you see the flashes with him and Chris and Patrick, but they're still trying to feel out kind of, because those are your 3 main options, right? Especially offensively, Chris, Patrick, and Tony, and you're trying to figure out, how to work it together, how to get the best shot. how to communicate on defense, how to be connected on that end of the floor. It just seems like a team that has room to grow, but it's got to do it. The pieces are there. Peyton Sandford's got to shoot better. I think he will. He's just in an incredibly bad funk right now, but we've seen that before with shooters here through the years. Jordan Bohannon's gone through slumps, Matt Gaten's on and on and on, and he'll come out of it, but they need him to. That's the one thing they're lacking right now is consistency from the perimeter.
Right. I mean, when you go 3 for 16 against Duke, you're going to lose. And they weren't good at all, even from the line. I mean, they missed 9 out of 15 free throw attempts. So yeah, when you're backcourt, when Tony Perkins had an off night shooting, he was 2 of 10, and Bowen didn't play so bad. I thought he played really well actually, and but Sanford.
Maybe Bowen's going to earn himself some more minutes. We'll see, because I still think Fran is figuring out rotations right now.
Right, no question. And Sanford has got to hit those shots. There's going to be some pressure on him tonight because, again, Des Moines area kids feel it so much differently than anybody else.
Yep.
And so tonight's going to be a big night for him. He's going to need to hit those shots. And the one area that is going to haunt them all the way through their exit in March is going to be the paint, size in the paint. And they couldn't get it a post. And Rebraca is done yeoman's work. And he's trying his best. And I think
he plays his ass off.
He does. And he's a good player. I think he's a little bit out of position. Or if you're going to play him at 5, you need a big, thick ass kicker at 4. And they just don't have that. And they're not going to get it because the transfer portal is not going to give them somebody here to play in January. So, Gundele got some minutes the other day, but they're just going to need to somehow shield that position, I think, as much as anything. And that's going to be tough. But I still think they've got a good team. But I agree with you that I think they're a little bit, last year they could totally lean on Keegan Murray. They could lean on Jordan Bohannon for leadership and
big shots.
Yeah.
Who's hitting big shots now? Who's the big shot taker this year?
Chris Murray, but
he should be.
Yeah, and he did against Georgia Tech certainly, but you need that to organically transition to Tony Perkins, to Peyton Sandford. Connor McCaffrey, is going to direct traffic the way he always does, but they do need more from they're guys who need to take that step up, and Patrick McCaffrey too, for that matter. And it could have been just an off shooting night in an arena they haven't been in for several years the other day against a really good opponent, or it could be something that will concern you big picture for a long time. But I think we'll figure that out not only today, and if Chris Murray's out, it's going to be a tough uphill climb to win. I mean, winning is going to be very, very difficult without him. But I think what happened Sunday and tonight, combined with what happened Tuesday, will tell us a lot about this team and its direction. I mean, is it as close to being a good team as we think, or is it one that's teetering on, hey, they got a long way to go and they got a short time to get there?
Yeah, interestingly, the RPI this morning, Scott, Iowa is 23rd in the RPI. Iowa State is 28th. Mm-hmm. So Hawkeyes have had a difficult schedule, no doubt. And it's, as you said, it's not going to get any easier tonight and Sunday. You've got 2 very good teams in the next, 4 days. So it'll be interesting to see how they look Sunday, having played Duke in New York. They got back at 5 a.m. Wednesday morning, I heard. Practice yesterday. Then have Iowa State today. I'm guessing they get either Friday or Saturday off, most likely Friday, or at least partial time off between tonight and the Wisconsin game. But they're young. They're in a hell of a lot better shape than we are. But still, I mean, it's physical basketball, and it takes your toll on you physically and mentally.
You get back that late from a trip like that, and then you got class. you have to go. You can't skip it. Now, maybe they have an online component or something, but let's face it, that they're probably not going to be as tuned in online as they are in person. You're asking a lot out of these guys. And this is what we've talked about with expansion, for these players going to all these places and, going to Duke for Tuesday night. You got to be a part of it. You can't ignore it, but it makes things awfully difficult when you get back that late. So, they can't afford to be jet lagged because this is as much as it doesn't matter because Big Ten is more important, it matters this is a legacy defining game. What you do in this game matters in this state. Everybody remembers LaFester Rhodes. Everybody remembers George Dieng kissing the crowd. Everybody remembers Jared Uthoff's first half and less so the second half. Luka Garza, what he did even in COVID. All these things matter.
Bohannon leaving his shoes on the court.
Exactly. And how big of a gesture, and thanks for the memes. Stuff like that all matters in this game because it gets discussed so often because the two biggest fan bases in the state are Iowa and Iowa State. So what you do matters, and you have to respect that part of it. And I'm sure they do. They understand what it's all about. And luckily with basketball, you don't get as many of the questions of, what do you know about this rivalry? What did you know about it before you came here? What have your teammates told you about it who grew up in the state? And you don't get that as much in basketball. Maybe it's because they didn't have any opportunities, after the Duke game to ask those questions.
So should be a good crowd tonight. It's been light at Carver Hawkeye Arena in terms of attendance this season, but should be a really good crowd tonight and should be fun over there. Looking forward to that. See if Iowa can complete the I think Iowa's trying to fight off losing the overall Cy-Hawk trophy. I think Iowa State needs like one more win here. Iowa held them off Sunday with wrestling, and then last night, see if the men can do the same, get Iowa back into this thing. We were both wrong on the Big Ten championship game in terms of the point spread, right? Or did we get it?
We both got it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a 21-point win for Michigan,
okay.
and
I couldn't remember what the spread was.
Yeah, so we're at you increased it to 50-53-1, and I'm 58-45-1. So when we get closer to the bowl, we'll figure out, or I guess bowl season starts next week, but none of the Big Ten teams. So we can decide next week or the week after if we want to, engage in go through the remaining bowl games. But
I need the Big Ten to kind of get back on my feet here. I'm willing to throw. I'm not going to rest on the Big Ten championship game. I'm fixing to come back.
All right. Well, we've got some big games there. Iowa's, is going to be the sickos game of the year. Obviously, I think they're like a 3-point underdog, or last I saw they were, but they were also.
Has there ever been a total this low in a bowl game?
Not in the last 4 years. And that's all we got so far for data. So I need to go back and I don't know how much I want to go back and look, but I can't remember anything. And I know that somebody said, hey, we checked, not in the last 4 years. So
yes. Sickos, good account. Follow them on Twitter. I guess that'll do it, Scott. Do we leave anything out? We've gone almost 2 hours, so I think we've probably hit on everything for this week.
Yeah, I'm really anxious for the news that will break in the next couple of hours after we finish this podcast. It tends to be the case. So, we'll have plenty to talk about next week, not only with the basketball games, but I'm sure we'll get a commitment or two. And and then it'll be the we'll talk about this right before signing day. Signing day is 6 days after our next pod. So we've got a lot going on, and this is a way, way, way busier month than we ever had experienced, a few years ago. So, hop on our motorcycle. Let's ride.
We will be back riding next week. Scott driving, I'm in the sidecar, and we will be here next week on the Hawkeye Hotspot to talk to you guys again. And we'll have a bunch, as Scott said, of news to talk about. We know we will. It's just kind of the way this thing rolls. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to our sponsors, and we'll talk to you guys a week from today. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.